Hi guys, happy Monday of the May long weekend. I hope you had an awesome weekend. I know the weather wasn't great Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it's awesome today. Hope you got outside, did some adventuring, gardening. I don't know, whatever y'all do. Um, so this is going to be our week 6 video update for BC First Peoples. Obviously, lots of information has come out in the news lately from the BC government about going back to school, when we're going back to school, etc. But we will continue online for now. And once I have more updates for you, I will absolutely make sure those get communicated to you. But for right now and for the next couple weeks, we are going to continue as we are. A couple different things that I want to update you on this week, and we will go to our class Scalantis page to check that out. So, as always, you're going to go start.fc69.bc.ca. That will take you to Scalantis. You just obviously scroll down to our page, BC First Peoples 11-12, Semester 2, always at the top. First thing, obviously, weekly check-ins didn't happen this weekend today, because it is a long weekend. That being said, if you have questions about anything from last week, a couple weeks ago, or this upcoming week, you can always send me an email and we can set up an alternate time to video chat or call and figure some stuff out. But yeah, this week was kind of a big week. Your Indian Act project was due, so either pick the essay or the timeline assignment. If you're still working on it, I say due because it's a very loose due date. So if you're still working on it, keep working away at it. I did upload independent project number 2 because I am getting quite a few of those Indian Act essays in. So I want to give everyone else the opportunity who's ready to move on. However, if that's not you and you're not quite done, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. There's no rush here. There's no, I was going to do some speedy something, wins the race analogy, but it just didn't come to me. Slow and steady wins the race. Yes. So keep working hard. Ask me if you have any questions. But chill. That should be what you're working on this week if you're not done. The next independent project, and I'm going to head over there now. Again, so each of our independent projects so far is focusing on a different big idea from the course. So the first one was the impact of colonialism, past, present, and future, social, political effects on Indigenous communities. Big idea independent project number 2 focuses on cultural expression and how expressing your culture can convey richness, diversity, and resiliency, particularly when it comes to First Peoples in BC. So this idea that Europeans didn't bring culture to Indigenous people when they arrived upon contact. Indigenous peoples had abundance of art and culture, and again, like that wasn't brought to Indigenous people. That was something that they had before, and that a lot of these communities have held on to very thoroughly, and that they are still engaging in today. And so sometimes when you look at an Indigenous piece of art, whether that be a carving or a painting or a song, you have to take a second and think, wow, like these traditions of art and culture have been passed on for generations and generations. And despite the Indian Act, despite residential schools, despite the 60 scoop, despite smallpox, these Indigenous communities were able to hold on to these cultural traditions and expressions. And now actually a lot of these artists use art as a way to express resiliency. So this ability to recover despite being pushed down again and again and again. That's this idea of resiliency. It's being tenacious, it's being aggressive, it's we can't be moved, we cannot be erased, our culture cannot be erased, and that being expressed through art, which is actually really quite amazing. So there are a couple different options here for you. And again, I chose to do this big idea after the Indian Act because I think before you can think about culture and the resilient culture of Indigenous people, you have to think about these systems that were put in place to try to take that away from Indigenous people. So we know that the Indian Act was put in place as a means to erase Indigenous culture and assimilate Indigenous people into Western society or into European ways of being and knowing. And over all these generations, Indigenous people have still been able to resist that. But it is important to understand those systems that were put in place to take those things away, and how Indigenous people have continued to push back against that and are now using art to push back against that as a form of cultural expression. So yeah, there's a little intro here, and then there are two options for your project. I want you to pick one of the two. The first option, this is a documentary that we would have watched in class to coincide with the Red Dress campaign. But it's basically focusing on art as a means to combat missing and murdered Indigenous women, children, and girls. And this is a favorite of mine. It's a beautiful documentary. It's heartbreaking and riveting at the same time. But it basically focuses, it's called The Highway of Tears. And it's a documentary that focuses on the epidemic of Indigenous women, children, and girls going missing along the Highway of Tears on the mainland of BC. The documentary itself is a piece of art that is resisting colonialism and hatred and discrimination. But it's basically what you're going to do with it after that. So you're going to watch the documentary. You do have to rent it. I used to be able to share a link, but I can't anymore. So you do have to rent it. You can rent it for $1.99, or you can actually buy the documentary. That's what I did. But it just gives you some background on this epidemic of violence against Indigenous women, children, and girls. And then you are going to select an artistic movement that has come about in recent years to combat this sort of violence. You're going to create a presentation. So you're going to choose your artistic movement, and then you're going to create a presentation about that. So who created the movement, and using 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why, who created the movement, who is involved, where is the movement taking place, when, why, and how. And then I want you, for each of those things, to include a picture and an image. And then finally, include a video that speaks to your artistic movement. Again, so you have to watch the documentary first and then pick a movement that coincides with this push to end violence against Indigenous women, children, and girls. And I've given you some options here. So the Red Dress campaign, Faceless Dolls, Walking with Sisters, Art in Action, Still Dancing. These are all movements that have come in place, artistic movements to fight against violence against Indigenous women, children, and girls. And then you'll create the presentation. Again, I've given you some options there. But yeah, the big deterrent here, guys, is if you can't pay the $1.99, it's $2, but it's worth it. And all of the money raised through the sales of the documentary goes back towards these movements that are in place to investigate murders and abuse of Indigenous women, children, and girls. So if anything, it's for a good cause. The second option is to create a First Peoples artist profile collection. So what you're doing is creating a collection of First Peoples artists and explore the way that these artists convey identity, meaning, and culture through their work. So you need to do 6 Indigenous Canadian artists, 6 different artists who use different methods. So I don't want to see 6 carvers on there or 6 traditional drummers. I want you to try to find as many as possible. So it could be a carver, a painter, a stone worker, etc. And you're going to have to do a little research for this one. And bonus marks if you can pick 6 Indigenous artists from BC. For each artist, you will need to research and record the following: their cultural background, where are they from, how do they identify, what kind of medium they use, how do you think the artist is using art to express themselves and their identity, how do you think the artist uses art to express their culture, and then how do you think this artist could be using art to represent their experience, their own or their community. And then do you like the art? How does it make you feel? Bonus marks, again, if you can connect it to what we talked about so far with the Indian Act. And then again, you've got to create a presentation, all the regular options. And bonus, if you want to embody your artist and see if you can create some sort of piece of artistic work that kind of reflects that style or those feelings. I don't know. It's up to you. You're looking for something else to do. So again, big idea, independent project number 2, art as an expression of cultural resiliency. Go through the steps, pick one of the 2 options. you've got 2 weeks as a floating due date for that one. This is a unit that I do every year with BC First Peoples, and it's always really powerful and kind of fun. So again, if you have any questions about that, as always, send me an email. Last thing I want to discuss with you guys is the weekly discussion question. So on week 3, you did a KWL chart for the Indian Act, so what you know, what you want to know, and what you've learned from your independent project. This week, you're going to fill out the learned section of that KWL. So I just want you to write a paragraph outlining kind of your biggest takeaways from what you've learned about the Indian Act, from the podcast, from your own research, from your project, from the slideshow, etc. And you can use the following questions to guide your paragraph, but I would like you to respond in paragraph format. Just highlighting what you've learned so far, what were kind of the big aha moments for you when it comes to the Indian Act. It could be what you still want to know more about, how it made you feel, etc. So again, just a paragraph for this week's discussion question, what you learned about the Indian Act. So we can kind of wrap that up and move forward to the big idea, independent project number 2, focusing on kind of how are Indigenous communities pushing back against colonial structures like the Indian Act. So yeah, that's all from me, guys. As always, email me if you have questions, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great week.